Happy Holy Week, everyone. Today is Thursday as we look at what happened on this day in history. Now, before we begin, I said something yesterday that I actually want to correct. The anointing of Jesus at Bethany, when Mary came in with a very expensive ointment and poured it all over his head and all over his feet, even rubbed his feet with her hair, that did not actually happen yesterday. That happened on Saturday. You can reference that in John chapter 12. So I apologize for being incorrect there. As I was studying for today's, I realized that. And so the chronology of the gospel accounts is very challenging. And since we're all quarantined, though, you all have plenty of time to check my work, go through it yourself, and then let me know what you learn. So as far as I know, the only thing that happened yesterday, at least that's recorded, is that Judas betrayed the Lord. He went to the religious leaders and gave them a prime opportunity to actually betray the Lord Jesus. And so what happened today, though, on Thursday? The disciples prepared the Passover meal. In Matthew chapter 26, verse 17 through 19, this is what it says. Now, on the first day of unleavened bread, the disciples came to Jesus, saying, "Where will you have us prepare for you to eat the Passover?" He said, "Go into the city to a certain man and say to him, 'The teacher says, my time is at hand. I will keep the Passover at your house with my disciples.' And the disciples did as Jesus had directed them, and they prepared the Passover." Now, for these disciples to prepare the Passover, they have to get a lot of things ready. First, they have to leave Bethany, go into Jerusalem, and find this man, find this house. They have to get the house all in order. They have to set up the table. They have to actually prepare the meal, get everything ready, and give people different responsibilities throughout the meal. So this is going to take all day. So that's what they were doing pretty much all day, preparing the Passover meal. Now, this was the Last Supper. Again, remember, this is Jesus' last night alive before he would die. He'll die tomorrow, and then he'll rise again on Sunday. But this is his last night. And so this is the Last Supper. Now, at this meal, there should have been someone should have been given the responsibility of actually making sure that everyone's feet were washed, that they were coming in clean. But this was not the case, and no one wanted to step up and serve all of the other disciples. And in John chapter 13, you can see this when Jesus washes their feet. Now in Luke chapter 22, verse 24, it says that there's a dispute that arises among the disciples about who was the greatest. Basically, what it came down to was no one was willing to lower themselves for the other people and actually serve each other. And so Jesus then models what it looks like to be a servant leader. And so he stands up and then bends over and washes each one of their feet during this meal to show what he came to do. The Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve, and there to be like him. And while they were eating then, a little bit after this, he told them all that one of them was actually going to betray him. They were all very sorrowful, and they asked, "Is it I?" Who is it? They wanted to know. This is what they said. Matthew chapter 26, verse 20. "When it was evening, he reclined at table with the 12. And as they were eating, he said, 'Truly I say to you, one of you will betray me.' And they were very sorrowful and began to say to him, one after another, 'Is it I, Lord?' He answered, 'He who has dipped his hand in the dish with me will betray me. The Son of Man goes as it is written of him, but woe to that man by whom the Son of Man is betrayed. It would have been better for that man if he had not been born.' Judas, who would betray him, answered, 'Is it I, Rabbi?' He said to him, 'You have said so.'" So Judas now knows that Jesus is on to him. He knows exactly what's going on. And the disciples, they just didn't get the hint. I'm not really sure what was going on there, but they wanted to know. They were still a little confused. And in John chapter 13, verses 21 through 30, this is what the disciples as a whole were doing. "After saying these things, Jesus was troubled in his spirit and testified, 'Truly, truly, I say to you, one of you will betray me.' The disciples looked around at one another, uncertain of whom he spoke. One of the disciples, whom Jesus loved, was reclining at table at Jesus' side. So Simon Peter motioned to him to ask Jesus of whom he was speaking. So that disciple, leaning back against Jesus, said to him, 'Lord, who is it?' Jesus answered, 'It is he to whom I will give this morsel of bread when I have dipped it.' So when he had dipped the morsel, he gave it to Judas, the son of Simon Iscariot. Then, after he had taken the morsel, Satan entered into him. Jesus said to him, "What you are going to do, do quickly." Now, no one at the table knew why he said this to him. Some thought that because Judas had the money bag, Jesus was telling him, "Buy what we need for the feast," or that he should give something to the poor. So after receiving the morsel of bread, he immediately went out, and it was night. So it's already nighttime. It's late at night. They're eating the meal. Jesus is on the Judas, and he basically tells Judas, go do what you've been planning on doing. Go do what you have already talked with the religious leaders about. Go betray me. And it's important to realize that this is according to Christ's timeline, and it's not according to Judas's or the religious leaders' timeline. This is all according to when and where and how Jesus will be giving up his own life. And so Judas left, and this is probably when Jesus instituted the Lord's Supper then with his real disciples at that point. Because this is also, remember, in the passage I just read, Jesus had handed out the bread. And so now we get into Matthew chapter 26, verse 26. Now as they were eating, Jesus took bread and after blessing it, broke it and gave it to the disciples and said, "Take, eat, this is my body." And he took a cup, and when he had given thanks, he gave it to them, saying, "Drink it of it, all of you, for this is my blood of the covenant, which is poured out for many, for the forgiveness of sins. I tell you, I will not drink it again of this fruit of the vine until that day when I drink it new with you in my Father's kingdom." So again, this probably all happened at the same time. Judas is gone by this point. They then, after the Lord's Supper, they sing a hymn. It says in verse 30, when they had sung a hymn, they went out to the Mount of Olives. And this is what Jesus says: "You will all fall away because of me this night. For it is written, I will strike the shepherd, and the sheep of the flock will be scattered. But after I am raised up, I will go before you to Galilee." Peter answered him, "Though they all fall away because of you, I will never fall away." Jesus said to him, "Truly, truly, I say to you, this very night before the rooster crows, you will deny me 3 times. Peter said to him, "Even if I must die with you, I will not deny you." And all the disciples said the same. So they sung a hymn. They left for the Mount of Olives. On their way, Jesus told them that they're all going to fall away from him. Jesus took this time, John chapters 14, 15, 16, and 17, to teach his disciples, to remind them of what he's taught them, to tell them about the coming of the Spirit, and to even pray for them. And when they made it then to the Garden of Gethsemane, he told them all to pray and keep watch. Matthew 26, 36 to 41 says this: "Then Jesus went with them to a place called Gethsemane, and he said to his disciples, 'Sit here while I go over there and pray.' And taking with him Peter and the 2 sons of Zebedee, he began to be sorrowful and troubled. Then he said to them, 'My soul is very sorrowful, even to death. Remain here and watch with me.' And going a little farther, he fell on his face and prayed, saying, 'My Father, if it be possible, let this cup pass from me. Nevertheless, not as I will, but as you will.' And he came to the disciples and found them sleeping. And he said to Peter, 'So could you not watch with me 1 hour? Watch and pray that you may not enter into temptation. The spirit indeed is willing, but the flesh is weak.' Soon after this, Judas led a crowd to arrest Jesus here. Matthew 26:47. While he was still speaking, Judas came, one of the 12, and with him a great crowd with swords and clubs from the chief priests and the elders of the people. And they, at this point, then there some sort of fight breaks out. Peter actually grabs his dagger, cuts some guy's ear off. But in Mark chapter 14, this is what it says in verse 51. So this is just trying to imagine some fight brewing and people are grabbing one another and beating one another. It says this: "And a young man followed him with nothing but a linen cloth about his body, and they seized him. But he left the linen cloth and ran away naked." So Mark just kind of inserted that. We're not even sure what that means or who that was or what that was all about. But anyway, that's just for your humor. So they then led Jesus to stand trial before the council, which is in Matthew 26, 57 through 59. Then those who had seized Jesus led him to Caiaphas, the high priest, where the scribes and the elders had gathered. And Peter was following him at a distance as far as the courtyard of the high priest. And going inside, he sat with the guards to see the end. And then in verse 69, what I just want to point out is that This trial that's going on with the council is going on at the same time when Peter is right outside in the courtyard. And remember, Jesus told Peter he was going to deny him 3 times. So then in verse 69, now Peter was sitting outside in the courtyard, and a servant girl came up to him and said, "You also were with Jesus the Galilean." But he denied it before them all, saying, "I do not know what you mean." And when he went out to the entrance, another servant girl saw him, and she said to the bystanders, "This man was with Jesus of Nazareth." And again he denied it with an oath, "I do not know the man." After a little while, the bystanders came up and said to Peter, "Certainly you too are one of them, for your accent betrays you." Then he began to invoke a curse on himself and to swear, "I do not know the man." And immediately the rooster crowed. And Peter remembered the sayings of Jesus, "Before the rooster crows, you will deny me 3 times." And he went out and wept bitterly. So this may have happened, this may be a little after midnight, so possibly like very early Friday morning. But basically this happened Thursday night, very late at night. All of this happened late at night on this day in history, Thursday. Happy Holy Week, everyone.